Welcome to On Purpose Coaching, where we challenge you to do better on purpose. I'm Joanie from On Purpose Planning and Consulting. So welcome to Enneagram'd on Purpose. This is a segment of my business where I interview and interact with various Enneagram types. I am an 8 on the Enneagram, so I'm definitely going to be here to challenge you, to awaken you, to ask you some questions that might ruffle your feathers a bit. So get ready to hear from some awesome family, friends, colleagues, people that I'm able to connect with. So this will be amazing on the show today. So I do believe in doing better on purpose. So as I was just explaining to Alyssa, look for for this to get better and better each and every time. So last time I got a chance to speak with some 7s on the Enneagram, and we learned how fun and connective they are, and also how sometimes they just like to look at the birds outside and get distracted from their loved ones, and just fun people all the way around. And today I get to actually talk to type 3s. So welcome to my 2 friends and guests today. I have Alyssa Preston with me and Dr. Frank Kendrala. And first things first, I just want to hear from you two, just to hear a little bit about who you are and how you came to know about the Enneagram. And so Alyssa, I'll have you go first, and you can share with us what that looks like for you.
Sure. Okay. So I came to learn about the Enneagram through Ian Morgan Cron's book, The Road Back to You. And it was just a passing interest reading his book, as I had read the other books by him, right? At least one other book by him, Chasing Francis. So I took a closer look at that book and discovered that I had a type. And and it explains a lot about my academic and professional aspirations and just the life that I've lived up until now. So, I came by it, really just through learning and discovery. There was nothing specific attached to that except, hey, you should really look at it. And, from an academic perspective in classrooms, as well as in teaching in more of a biblical context, I had touched on it, but never really explored it. So
Awesome.
There we go.
Thank you. How about you, Frank?
It came to me. Stacy actually sent it to me.
Okay.
I've taken quite a few different over the course of my career and life. Whether it be in academia, whenever I went to college, and later for postgraduate work. And so you take a lot of different things. And I take a lot of workshops where you've had many different types. And I could go on and name them, but so that's pretty much how it was presented to me. And then and it was interesting. I mean, it seemed right on when I went through it, but I'm slightly older than I'm thinking both of you, probably by 20 years at least.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, awesome. Well, good to hear from you thus far. And what I'd like to hop right into is actually just a little bit about your type. So these are going to be very high level. The 3s, known as the achieving performer, the energetic, goal-oriented motivator, inspirational role model to various people out there, best in class. I like that term, best in class. But also the pretentious workaholic. So sometimes 3s are viewed as the go-getters and the folks that kind of go, 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 go. Some motivations that tend to be aligned with the 3 is to be valued, to be admired, to be respected. And sometimes those fears that end up creeping in on a 3 are failing, being unsuccessful, or looking bad, or not being able to show up and be the person that they think that they want to be. So just in this short description, and again, feel free as I ask these questions, either of you can chime in. What does this type, what are some of the things that kind of came across in your feelings as you started to learn about your type? And I've kind of mentioned them again here just now. Any frustrations or any, oh, that was great, like that was really me. What are some of those things that kind of popped out to you both as you were learning about the 3s?
Frank, do you want to start?
Sure. Yeah,
Go ahead.
straight on. I mean, it, every aspect of this is me. There's no doubt about it. And
Mhm.
the good or bad of it, however you want to look at it, is when I set a goal, almost nothing gets in the way of
Okay.
it. And so, I mean, to go, not to be anything other than just me, I'll be frank about it, as I say often, is that when I set a goal last year, beginning of last year, 2019, that I wanted to put on paper everything that was in my mind as far as my first fiction book. And so I sat down and did it, and within a very short period of time, it was done.
Yeah.
It took longer to get it through the publisher and everything, but the point is that when I set a goal, there's nothing going to get in the way of it. And so, short of it just being unattainable, but typically I set very high goals, and unfortunately, I don't know about Alyssa how you feel when for you, but I know for me is that if I set a goal, sometimes there's collateral damage, and that's something that I've learned over the years, is that I have to sometimes back off when those that are around me might not have the same, not even goals, but just abilities and thought processes. So I mean,
Right.
there's the aspect of know your why, and and so when you're building out goals, at least for me, if I put them too far out, there will be collateral damage in my attempt to achieve them.
Yeah. Alyssa, how does that, can you kind of coincide with any of those, or does it look a little bit different for you? Yeah.
No, I mean, this is cookie cutter Enneagram 3. I mean, it's easy. I would say what what Frank is talking about was clear to me, like in completing a dissertation, that you get done with your, having done the same kind of work, you complete your coursework, and then they give you this enigmatic deadline of like, write a book.
Yeah.
And in a scholarly world, there's a lot of stops and starts. So that was probably on my first go around with the collateral damage, right? It's extraordinary work, but I think what Frank's highlighting is something that goes into the pretentious workaholic category, because there's so much value placed on performance, right? It's not an adrenaline rush. It's just hardwired into the DNA of a 3. Like I like to perform. I mean, I like doing work. There's a great satisfaction from work well done. And it's not so much from, I don't need to be on a platform or on a stage and be applauded. I like the well done, you did a great job, but I really like seeing a completed project. I like seeing things that come together. I like the precision and the artistry that comes along with creating. In my particular way, it's with words, or with development of classes and things like that. So I would say that the collateral damage can often be health. It can be mental rest. I am in a particular season where I'm studying the act of Sabbathing and resting, because I actually don't know how to do that. Like it is the 4th commandment, and I don't get it. I'm like, why would God do this? Because nobody needs to rest.
I definitely understand that from an 8. I'm like, let's go intense. Yes.
Yeah. You know what? And so it's the beauty of a 3 though. And I think this is something that Frank and I probably bring to the table, is when we are healthy and these things are in harmony, we bring an intentionality to our life. Not a perfectionism, but an intentionality. So, we know when to say yes and we know when to say no, so that our value and success is well placed. And we also know what it is that we're doing and why we're doing it at an extreme. And I think in my early years, but really before, I would say maybe before 5 years ago, I worked for the sake of working, and worked for the sake of other people telling me this is your next goal. And that alone ultimately leads to frustration and burning out, because eventually a 3 comes up against themselves going, is this really what I want to be doing? Like, is this me? And I think, we will get there soon, sooner than some other numbers. But when we get there, suddenly anybody else's request of us becomes really problematic, because I need it to line up.
Okay.
And so again, that idea of inspiration and goal oriented, it can be set for you by someone else, which I think is where a lot of unhealthiness comes from, and where these ideas get skewed in really troubling, in collateral damage sort of ways, where we can, at the expense of our health, work ourselves into exhaustion. But when we know what we're aiming at, when I know what I'm aiming at, the energy is there and the joy is there, and there's also a deadline and a stop until the next project, but I know I'm not just spinning my wheels for somebody else's reasons. Does that make sense?
That does make sense. And that actually takes us right into our next piece about core motivations. So you kind of touched on some of these about the why. Frank even talked about it. Why do we do the things that we do? And it's probably one of the reasons why I actually really love the Enneagram, Frank, versus, Myers-Briggs and the colors and the disc and all the other typologies out there, is because we do start to really deep dive into our core motivations when it comes to our types. And for the three core motivations, your fears being exposed or thought incompetent, insufficient, ineffective, worthless, failing to be or appear successful. And again, that's either based on your own goals, like you both just said, and also like Alyssa stated out, other goals people are putting on top of you. Also then kind of drives into that unhealthy fear of having others' expectations placed upon you. And then even those core desires that threes have, having a high status and respect and being admired and being successful and being valuable, and what they do being associated with how they live their life and what that looks like. And even with their core weaknesses of deceit. And here's where that unhealthiness comes in, especially deceiving yourself into believing that you're the only image you present to others, embellishing the truth sometimes, or shape-shifting, as they like to call it, based on, again, other people's expectations of who you're supposed to be versus who you've defined yourself to be. And the core longing in the end of that is what you're searching, what you're looking for, is to be loved for simply being you. Not for what you do, not for what you bring to the table, not for what you can produce, not for the work that you put out there, right? For people to look at, to read, to whatever the profession that the three may have, but it's simply, I'm okay being me, and I want others to be okay with me just being me. So just even particularly your core weakness, as stated, how do you resonate with that? Is that something that is a struggle? Because Beth McCord, she's one of the Enneagram specialists out there that I'm actually working with to get my certification, and she says, like, our core weaknesses are likened to what Paul says are what buffets us in our side, right? That thing that's always going to trip us up, something that's kind of going to, it doesn't ever go away, so to speak. We may be healthy, we may can work through it, but it's something that it'll continue to trip us up as we continue to live, right? Until Christ does the great work in us. So what does that look like for you to kind of, and deceit might not be the word, but just not being able to show up as yourself? Do you struggle with that from time to time? And what type of an environment do you feel like that's something that you get yourself pulled more into?
You want me to go, or?
Yeah, that's fine. Yep. Okay.
Yeah, for me, and I've talked about this quite a bit in outside things that I've done, is the imposter syndrome. Is, the Lord has blessed me with a lot of skills. I mean, I've, over 4 decades in corporate America, running many large projects. And, one time I had 150 employees in one operation that I ran. So you have a lot of different things like that. So you get out there and your weaknesses, and you don't want them to show up. And then, I'm 63 now. So I look back and I think, wow, these are all the things that I did because of that weakness, or that, I don't have a better word, but fear of somebody saying, well, you're really not who you seem to be.
Yeah.
But the Lord has given me a lot of skills. I've been giving a lot of projects. I was given one years ago. It's 15 years ago. about building a whole application, software type tool. And I didn't know I didn't know how to code all that, and just sit down and read every book you could get on it, because I don't want to appear that I can't do something, you know. So, and I could go on and on with it, but I think this goes back to my first point, is that fear, or whatever it might be, causes collateral damage. It'll give one point, and then, Alyssa, you can have it, is a couple of years ago, my dad passed, and so we had to renovate my parents' home before we could sell. And we've done it before, you know, not my parents' house, but other homes. But where I get so in tune with a goal, I went for days without sleeping. So I'd go to work, then I'd go to my parents' place, fix it, and I'd work through the night and go to work. And I did it for like 3 or 4 days. I forget exactly. It was coming up on a holiday. And so I'd say this is the point. This is collateral damage. I didn't realize how tired I was, but I was walking with a plate of food, and I fell asleep walking. And the only thing that woke me up before I did a face plant was the plate hit the floor first and woke me up. So that's only a couple of years ago. So that was 2016. So my point is that sometimes, at least I can't speak for you, but for me, you get this goal, you get this drive, you get this desire to do something. So it's a core desire you have, and this desire to be the best you can be, because others are depending on you, to the point of sometimes you end up doing things you really shouldn't do. And sometimes you say things you shouldn't say too. And my saying is, this is my saying. I says, I'm leaving before I say something that you'll regret. Not me, but you know. And it's
the candor.
Yeah. So it's kind of like, and so I say with this is that those are all wrapped in. For me, they're all wrapped together in a sense. Is again, the imposter syndrome. You know you should be able to do it, but others might be looking on thinking that you better be able to do it,
right?
And you don't want to prove anybody or let anybody down. I'll leave it like that.
Yeah. I think it's interesting because I process it a little differently. And I think it's the difference between an authentic and an adaptive self, right? So and I think imposter syndrome is certainly felt, especially if you are in an industry where expectations of expertise come with it. But I think there is that deceit is, really born out of this idea that people actually leverage a 3 because they're high performers and because they get things done. And so part of the imposter syndrome or the adaptive nature of being a 3 is we come by it honestly, because for a long time people have been saying, oh, give this project to Alyssa, or give this project to Frank, they'll figure it out. And so eventually, if you're not careful, you'll believe your own press, like that you can pretty much do anything. And so there's a sense of like, what are your limits? Actually coming up and saying, you know what, no, here's what I'm really good at, owning your strengths. So I think the beauty of knowing that this exists is being able to also very fully say, here's what I'm good at.
Yeah.
And being able to say, this is not up my alley. And so I find myself, at least at this stage of my life, really defending my turf. Like, I can excel for you here.
Right.
I will not excel for you outside of this arena. And so if you want that, you're going to have to look for somebody else. And it's given me a great deal of freedom, because that kind of honesty also allows me to say, you're not going to get the best work from me unless I have a month to do this. Yeah. But I mean, it's still a work in progress, because depending on, I think, what kind of industry you're in, my particular profession and industry requires a lot of mental margin. If I don't have that, then I don't produce the same way. So I'm not going to be a fast responder or learner. I mean, I can crank something short out quickly, but if you want my best work, you need to give me time to work. And the deceit that I would have fallen into maybe, 10 years ago was, oh, sure, I can get that out to you. Just give me a day or two. Well, now I know, like, that's not my best quality work, and that's not going to be your ideal. So from my adapted self, the self that would have, perhaps you would call it imposter syndrome, but the self that would have said, sure, I have to do this because other people are expecting me to do it. And I don't want to seem incompetent. I mean, I know I can do this. Would have pushed myself to sleep deprivation, would have pushed myself to, skimp or cut corners on other things that are really important, most notably self-care. Like that's the first to go. And then I would come back into, yes, I get it done. And then I'm asked to do more. And so it's a compound effect. Then you run on empty, right? And what ultimately will go back to what suffers is that if I don't know if other threes are like me, but my self-care is the number one thing to go because everybody else becomes my priority. And that could come with status or admiration or just the idea of like success is this way. However you look at it. But for me, it's this idea of my identity being for a way too long ascribed to performance. And so I had to make a pretty big shift from away from performance into something that was much more permanent and, giving me a sense that like, I can acknowledge my limits and it's okay. If that's not going to work for somebody, that's okay.
Yeah.
It doesn't diminish my capacities or qualifications or capabilities for that matter.
Yeah, and that's so funny that you brought that up about self-care being the first thing to go in practicality. So of the instinctual subtypes, all right, of each type, self-preservation, social, or one-to-one, you just described the counter type of a 3, which is the type that is self-sacrificing and actually sometimes mistypes as a 2. So it makes sense that you would instantly, if you fell into that subtype, would go into how do I actually start to do these things for others, and I'm worried more about my relationships, and I need to understand how to keep those going. And yeah, so that makes complete sense, and actually even leads me into my next question. What do you feel is the best thing that you actually bring to a relationship?
I will say it for me, dependability.
Okay.
I'm very serious. I mean, I give you a lot of scripture for it. I mean, but I'll say this: Colossians 3:23 and 24 have been my life verses. For whatsoever you do heartily unto the Lord, not unto men, knowing that you shall receive the reward of the Lord, et cetera, et cetera. So the point is that for me is I'm doing it under that motivation. So if I tell you I'm going to do something, I will do it. And like Alyssa stated, I wasn't like this always when it came to being able to acknowledge not that I couldn't do something. But so let's go back to, and again, the Lord's giving me a lot of abilities, whether it be analytical, because in my day work it's all analytical, and my alternate work is all creative, whether it be writing or photography or videography or anything of that. So it's both sides. But we've renovated quite a few places. In times gone by, I would have done plumbing. Well, at this point in my life, I'll do anything electrical. I'll do all the other stuff. But plumbing, I'm calling a buddy of mine. We'll send him a text. Can you come over? And you follow what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But it wasn't always that way. It was unfortunately a hard lesson to learn at times. And maybe it's a guy thing. I'm not exactly sure. But I think it's just, for me, I've had a tremendous career in life, and so I've done a lot of things. You've gone in and I've started operations up where, like, I don't know where you're from, but you're familiar with Cranberry?
Yeah.
Okay, so the FedEx there that's right next to Costco.
Yep.
I opened that in '89.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, so I was downtown Pittsburgh before that, and then I opened that one in '89. I was there for 9 years. And so the point was, I had no experience in that, but when I was given the opportunity, I'll figure it out. And that's what we did. And I did that for a lot of things. But now at this stage in life, all right, if I could do it, I will do it. I love learning, spend a lot of time reading and things. But if I know that it's not a strength, I'm not going to put a lot of time into it.
Yeah, that's similar to what Alyssa was stating.
Exactly. Yes. Yes.
So what do you think you bring to the best thing you bring to a relationship, Liz?
Yeah, it's definitely not dependability. And I don't mean that I'm not dependable. I say that, but I hear what Frank is saying, and I think I know what you mean, Frank. But I'm learning to be probably more selective for the sheer purposes of saving my own my own sanity. So I would say that one of the things that I bring to the table is, you know, I'm going to be a really strong motivator, and I would call it like an influencer in a person's life. So I will go, in the Strengths Finder, I'm a relator. There's a lot of different ways to talk about people who connect and communicate well. And even though that's my background, my idea of relationships is narrow and deep. And so I've learned that I'm not a person who is drawn to, you know, working in significant crowds, which means I don't necessarily need for a lot of people to know I'm even part of something. What I value and what I bring to the table is the kind of work that, even though it may be to a large room of people, it's deep work. And so, you know, I'm not sure that that is particular to the Enneagram, but it's played out in the value dimension of a 3, right? In the way that a 3 has a very, a high awareness of what is valuable and what does constitute success. So for me, it's become it's become like this artfulness and of working with people. And actually, it's been the story of my life, whether I was a professor or in ministry or now an entrepreneur. That's the work, but it is not a superficial work. So, you know, I think you're going to have 3s that personality wise end up on different ends of that spectrum.
Yeah.
Mine is not so much, it's project driven, but the end of that project is always, how deep is the work going to go? So I will turn down projects that are okay projects, even though they would affect people if they're not going to key into my strengths, because I know the value I want to add to people. And so let me back that up and say what I bring is a value dimension to a person's life. I like to say that I mind the golden people. And if you can give me somebody for a little bit of time, that's probably a gift I can bring. I can call that out in people, motivate and inspire and influence them ultimately to maybe see their life and their purpose in a bigger picture way.
So, okay. So with that being said, what's something that you two actually need from a relationship? What is something that you look for in others to bring to you?
Yeah. Can I go first on this one, Frank?
Yeah,
No,
yeah, go ahead, definitely. No,
I
go
got
ahead.
this one. I'm like, low maintenance. Do not be high maintenance. Oh
yes.
my goodness. I do not respond well to, I mean, if you are needy, you are going to send me right into retreat. And I mean that with all the love in my heart, but it is not, I heard John Maxwell say this, and I was like, oh my goodness, this is me. And I now have a way to explain it. He said, you know, he tried to counsel people and they would come back with the same issue week after week. And he was like, I don't even understand this. How can you be repeating this issue? And he said, I realize I'm not a counselor, but I'm more of a coach and mentor. And I heard him say that, and I'm like, now I get me. So I would say if you have a high need to verbal process, a high need to always be in touch with your emotions, I'm not going to be your companion into those arenas. I can listen for a while, but I'm going to be the person who wants to activate and move you. There we go. Not your processor.
That is so funny, right? Because 3s, 6s, and 9s are dominantly and repressed in the same centers, which would make sense because that would mean your feelings repressed. So you're
100%.
You're like, I can't deal. Let's move on.
I see feelings and I'm like, no,
thank you. How about you, Frank?
What about you?
I have to echo that 100-fold. I mean, seriously. So I've had a lot of people work for me, you know, whether it be hourly employees, management. I've taught, God knows how many people I've taught over the course of, you know, whether it be photography or technology or whatever. And I'm with Alyssa. If you're high maintenance, I am not the one for you.
Yeah.
And that's why years ago, I came to the conclusion I can't be a pastor. Because
no way.
Yeah.
I'd be more like the evangelist, and I love it. You know, both my wife and I, we like starting things and then moving on. And so I've actually had people in some of the small groups I've had, and I said, look, I'm not the one for you for being a coach, because you're way too high maintenance for me. I can't do it.
So like to
The
sum
loving
that up,
handoff.
Yes. And
so to sum that up, what you guys need from relationships are people who are kind of sure of themselves and that can
yes,
have the ability to get themselves moving, right? To get themselves
self-motivated.
self-motivated,
Yeah.
self-motivators.
I,
Yeah.
yeah, I guess I'll put it just to sum it up. So I don't want to sound like I'm cold, but it could come off that way. People sometimes think
Yeah.
that, and I'm just like, look, you go work over here. There's a thing called YouTube. You could study this, and I mean, years ago we used to. There's.
Did you Google this first? I mean,
Yeah.
before you asked me, did you read the directions?
So I
word.
just got to put this into there. I mean, when I hired a coach last year for me to help me, write the first fiction book, I had some nonfiction in the past, but fiction's completely different. So we put it out there and it was all process driven. That's how my mind thinks. But it was also like, just give me the material and then I'll figure it out. And then I'll get on the call and we'll chat whenever we have to, like once a week, twice a week, whatever it was. But it was, I don't need you to hold my hand.
Yeah.
And
Correct.
that's how I am with others in a relationship. And so, that's tough. Like my text messages are short in the morning. I text my children and my sister and everybody else, hi, good morning. If they want to have a conversation, this is getting too deep.
Yeah.
That's cool. Let's even look at the triads, right? So you all fall into the heart triad, but also into the emotionally intelligent triad, so to speak. You do have a passion for significance. You are feelings in balance. We kind of just talked a little bit about that. And you're emotionally driven by shame. For the three in itself is probably a lot more associated with what Alyssa was talking about, with that adaptive and authentic self and that struggle to try to show up for somebody else, which is not you. And therefore that causes feelings of shame of, why can't I just be who I am, and why do I have to be something else for someone else?
Right.
So I just want to understand, even for you, being in this triad, heart triad, it seems like you kind of don't belong there, right? At least from your two perspectives. So, because like when I talk to a two, my friends who are twos are very, again, relationally oriented, where they want to spend time, they want to understand, they got all the time in the world to help somebody get motivated to do something. And then you have fours that are they probably just want to understand, just because they just want to deep dive into the feelings of it all and try to connect with you on that level. So is it kind of a struggle to be in on this side of the Enneagram? Because it seems like you all probably belong more in the gut triad of the doers and the shakers and the visionaries and a little bit lopsided, it seems. So I guess what made you even resonate that yes, you were a 3 versus maybe a 1 or versus an 8, if you know any more about the Enneagram, the people who are able to, it described a lot about actually what you already mentioned. So how did you finally connect on that number, that was where you landed?
Well,
I'm happy to go ahead, Frank.
Okay,
no, please.
Looking at the heart triad, so passion for significance, that's important for me. I mean, and it's not just as I'm older. When I was young, in my 20s and teens, I felt that I wanted to be significant, but I didn't need to be number one. And as after I got saved and started studying the Bible and stuff, Barnabas jumped out at me, and the reason I'm saying it is he was passionate to help others reach their potential, and that's how I've been in my life. I didn't, I got to a point where I no longer wanted to be top dog. I didn't want to have all these employees. I didn't want that. I get, and so I moved in my day work into a supportive role. I'll build this stuff. I'll develop these tools for you. I'll lead it up, but I don't want to be top dog.
Yeah.
So the significance was still there. Emotion-driven shame. No, I'm not shamed that way. It's if I inadvertently hurt somebody, whether it be, like I say something just because I'm being frank, I'm just being open, honest about something, that drives me more to it, pulls back. That's the hard side of it that I see there.
Okay.
And then a feelings imbalance. Yeah, I will say this. I don't know about you, but it's either this or this. There's no in between. There's no gray when it comes to, for me. I'll battle with somebody to the death, basically, to help them. But if you're on the other side of it, okay, we'll just move on. And you know what I'm saying? I don't want to sound cold, but there's no in between for me.
Yeah. Okay.
So,
how about you, Liz?
I think there's a spectrum for emotional intelligence, and there's a distinction here, right? There's a distinction between being self-aware and being aware of others. And so for me, my emotional intelligence towards others, I mean, I may not like where you are, but I'll probably be able to pinpoint it. I'll still come at you that's what it feels like. I come at you from my position. So I have to work really hard to temper and to ask questions, because I'm so confident in my ability to perceive with accuracy where you are. And I want to say it's not a self-confidence like, it's not a prideful self-confidence. It's almost like you would call it intuition, right? That I get it. I get where you are. So that kind of awareness, I think, is where the imbalance comes in, because if you ask me how to articulate where I am, I need a wheel of emotions, and then I have to look at it and I'm like, I could probably use this word because I'm not very connected to, and that's indicative of a 3. We tend to not be very connected to how we feel. So don't ask me how I feel, because I was afraid you were going to ask me that. How are you feeling right now? And I'm like, I don't know, I don't know. But I would say Frank hit the nail on the head, because I think what makes me a 3 and not a 1 and not an 8 is the passion for significance. Like a 1 is motivated by justice, and 8 is definitely going to be way more motivated by being right. You know what I'm saying? That there's a being a front runner, being the head. Like I still, I mean, I'll gladly play second. I'll gladly play first. That doesn't necessarily weigh in, but I want to be heard. And being heard is a matter of significance more than it is a matter of being right. And I think being right can be maybe an unhealthy variation on that. And by being right, it's not so much like you need to hear me. It's that tenacious hold on. I know what I'm talking about. And now we're going to cross into things that come into personality. All of those are driven, but I would say more than anything in my life is am I going to make a difference? Am I going to make a difference?
That makes sense.
Yeah. Can I add to that? That's a very good point. And that's sort of what I've done with everything, is that there was something when I was working on the MBA studies at Liberty years ago, it said there was something we studied. It was a whole course basically around when you leave wherever you work or whatever you're helping, whatever volunteering on, there should be a void. It's not that you want them to hurt, but if there's no void when you leave, then you really made no significance. There's nothing. And I've taken to heart when I said, when I was a teenager, but as I grew in life, it really became who I am. So if I retired next week from, I've been in FedEx for 40 plus years or whatever, there will be a void because of what I've been able to contribute for all the time. And that's how I am in life too, is if you're doing something and then you don't do it anymore and nobody missed you, then there was no significance in what you did. So yeah, I'm with Alyssa on there. I mean, sometimes people will say, well, you always want to be right. No, I've studied, I've learned, I know that.
Like, I come by this, I'm here with stuff. I come packing, like I've done the work. I understand it. And
that's right.
And I think one of the greatest, the worst way to treat a 3, at least my kind of 3, is to dismiss my background, my experience, as if it has no value in the context. And truthfully, I mean, I really believe unless God does a work in a 3, that will be one of the greatest stumbling blocks, because it causes pride to rise up. And you're going to have to be able to look and say, it's okay that they don't value what I have. Like, that's, you know, not everybody will, but that is, I mean, if you want to know how to honor me or honor a 3, recognize what they bring to the table and value their inputs.
Yeah, and that's funny. Even moving to the next piece, and you kind of hit on it. 7s, 8s, and 3s are externalizers. They're aggressive, right? They're out and up. We speak in terms of future, right? So it's how are we moving forward? What does this look like? How do we keep going? Process through thinking and doing. And you struggle to accept. We struggle. I say we. I'm an 8. We struggle to accept reality. So it's either I'm going to fix it by going and get the information, right? I'll you know, even though in that moment, it's actually not what it is, right? So it's a struggle to go back and forth with someone on different things of that nature. So
Amana,
I did want to
say hi to Lamar.
Hey.
Hey.
Hey, brother.
I'm on a call. Yeah, recorded call. So you're on.
Yes, sir. Yeah. So it's funny about you and you both kind of started to tread into it. One of the major last pieces I want to talk through is our stressors. What causes us to be stressed? What causes us to go to that dark place? What causes us to move towards unhealth? And for a 3, it's to move to a 9. So suddenly shutting down or being disengaged, apathetic, passive, aggressive, that. Remaining busy to avoid downtime. I think I heard that already. And even if you're not even focusing. So I heard that as well. So I may be doing a bunch of things but they're not the best that I could be actually doing. Withdrawing, which means that you're actually prone to depression because it's kind of opposite of your natural state and how you would naturally like to be. Or even numbing out, vegging out, spacing out. Those are some of the activators or triggers that kind of align with when you're stressed. So what I'd like to know is what actually sends you there? What's something that will send, you know, Alyssa and Frank to be in a stressed out state, or something that kind of sends you down that road?
Go ahead. Okay, there are 2 things that send me there without, almost like without passing go. You know, don't collect $200.
Not collect $200. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, I say this now, and one will be the imbalanced demands of other people. So the failure on, and I say this very specifically, the failure on somebody else's part to take responsibility for themselves, and then to interrupt my life and demand of me something that I do not have the mental capacity. So this is going to play into number 2. That will send me there. And that will send me into, I would say, you said passive aggressive, right?
Yes.
That will send me into potentially resentful places. And the second is overcommitment, which I do to myself.
Okay.
You know, because I feel like I feel like I can, and because sometimes, you know, because I might be quick with a certain skill set, I'm like, sure, I can do that. But my yeses to too many things in a specific window of time that don't actually give me that margin again, that will send me into a state. And I like to say that I will function in a low grade sense of depression. So it's sort of this numbing kind of constant feeling of like I'm just in a funk, and I don't talk about it. Very few people, if anyone, will ever know, but that's how I talk about it to myself. It's low grade sense of depression, or to God, truthfully.
So here's the thing. This is funny. So this is your high maintenance friend telling you.
Oh yeah.
So I know when you're getting to that point is you have a tail, right? Here's your non-poker thing you do is when I can ask you, it can be about anything, but I'm asking you about something, and I know you're either heading to that state or in that state, is you will hesitate to answer. You'll be like, yeah.
Yeah.
So I know you have to take longer to process.
Yeah. And it's especially true if you're asking for something that requires a commitment.
Yeah.
Like, but I would say, since, I mean, I've worked with you now for a long enough period of time to say that in part, that's my pause before sending myself into this place. Because if I can catch it ahead of time, I can potentially keep myself from falling into this nineness,
Exactly. Yeah. Yes. How about you, Frank? What stresses you out?
All right, so there's two things. There's a quote that I say all the time: when all is said and done, there's more said than done.
Okay.
So when somebody states they're going to do something and they don't, and now their lack of planning becomes my emergency, it drives me. Okay, so it's sort of I think, listen to what you're saying. So that's the one thing, and you get that when you're working with a lot of different folks, whether it be in corporate America or volunteers, whatever it might be. Okay, so that goes back to my dependability. The other thing is I'm very process driven. I mean, very, very, everything is in order. Like if you look in my office, it's not organized, but in my head it is.
Me.
Yeah. So my office is in a disarray. I'm not saying it isn't, but everything's a process. Okay. So so let me take you some. So if we'll go to the photography side of it. If I'm going to cover an event, I go through a series of checks many times. 2 days before, the day before, the day of. Do I have this? Do I need this? Do I have these lights? So it's very process driven. So what I'm saying that is, if we're out doing something and we had this plan of 1, 2, 3 we're going to do, and somebody throws a 2.4 in there, no, you're throwing out the process. Okay. And so what I typically do, and it's something that I work on, is I say nothing. You sort of that passive aggressive shutdown, and then what it does is that it causes frustration with whomever you might be with, because in their mind, well, why can't we just do this?
Right.
So,
but some good ones. I do want to hear, before I go to my last slide, is those, I heard those about other people, but what's one thing that you hear that you frustrate other people about? Where do you frustrate people? What have they told you? Like Lamar,
because when I'm right, I'm right. Like when I know it, I'm like, and I grab hold of it and I'm like, for real. And I think like an Enneagram 3 likes to be liked. So there's a tension here, right? So it's probably partially environment and training. Again, I'll go to the strengths finder, because I'm a context person. So I anchor my understanding on a lot of things. So you never get a one-dimensional answer from me. And so I frustrate people because my yes is complex. And so my yes always has why behind it, which makes me right all the time. Or it sounds like I have to be right. So even if I'm trying to have a dialogue, I can come off sounding, well, nobody asked for all that. And I didn't ask you to be right about this. And I'm like, I'm not trying to be right. I'm just trying to tell you why you should know why you're wrong. And it's like, oh my gosh. So I've had to work really hard to not frustrate people that way by asking questions and becoming a better active listener and not coming in as the professor, which, I mean, it's really hard to break that training. Ministry will do it to you. It did it to me, and now I'm in a different place where I come in, hopefully trying to be more circumspect in how I hear. But I think I frustrate people because people who have worked with me before say, you always tell me what to do. And I'm like, I don't need to tell you what to do. I'm just giving you options. So I've learned to frame those as, have you considered, or perhaps if you tried, which can sound soft, but it's my attempt to be part of the normal conversation for so many other numbers on the Enneagram. And it's just perceived, it can be perceived as soft communication, but truly it's code switching. It's a learned trait so that I don't offend.
Exactly. How about you, Frank?
Yes. So you might want to, when you're done, next time you see Cheryl, tell her that.
You can give her this recording, I'm sure.
So the point is, so yes, I'm a lot like that. in the downside, maybe it's the way life has been. You know, again, I've had a tremendous career, a lot of different things. I've been able to do so many different things in life. But what I do when I see that, I just want to do sort of like what Alyssa, you're saying there. It's okay, well, these are how you're supposed to do it. I have a tendency now to say nothing and just pull back, you know, just thinking, well, you're going to run down, you're going to do these 18 steps, but you can really do it in 2. And I find that, and maybe it's again my age, because most folks my age aren't technical. You know, they're not able to build websites. They're not able to write software. You know, it's just, you know, I'm weird. I know that. So when I'm talking to somebody maybe in their 20s and they struggle with something, I said, well, if you know, give me 15 minutes, I can show you how to do this. I've spent a lifetime or 20 years doing this kind of thing. And they said, no, I want to do it myself. Okay. And then, but years gone by, I would have been different. But now it's like, okay, all right, I'm not going to fight with you. And it was something I had to learn because, especially, you know, I spent 20 some years in management. And when you have a lot of people working for you, Alyssa, I think sort of like what you were saying is you have a tendency to want to tell them what to do. You know, you have, you know, one time I had 150 employees. And so you want to tell everybody, okay, well, this is the way you're supposed to do this. This is, you know, you go through this whole thing, boom, boom. And I've had to learn not to do that. And,
Can I add one thing to that? I think the difference is Sarah Jakes Roberts calls it mind your business ministry, right? So there's a ministry to that mental, that self-editing function. So, you know, because people don't want a know-it-all all the time in their life. And so I think what I hear you saying, Frank, is it's a beautiful thing because the goal isn't to be right, it's to be influential, right? To give people the opportunity to step up into something. And so the more you start to realize, like, I actually have hardwired into my DNA as an Enneagram 3, the capacity to be that person who creates the space for somebody else to step up. And also the person who can hand people off. Like we have the best of a lot of worlds because we're not so like cut and dry that we're just going to be like, all right, you're not moving with us, I'm out. Right. Because 8s can be a lot like that. Right. And that's nothing on you, Joanie, because you work with people all the time. So you've learned how to temper this, you know, and we're not so justice minded like a 1 where it's right or wrong. We can look and say, hey, there's some fuzzy area in here and let's get into the mud of this. And then like, let's move. Right. So we have a lot of this. We have a lot for the strong personalities that we can be. We have a lot of ability to harness that well. And I think one of the best places to do that is to learn to listen. And Maya Angelou said it, think twice, speak once, you know, learn to harness that because there's so much that we can bring to life or bring to death by what we say. And people listen to a 3 because we tend to be loud and commanding, you know, I mean, not necessarily annoying, but we just, when we say it with kind of confidence that makes you go, do they really know what they're talking about?
Exactly. So let's talk through this last one on just some tips on how to actually relate to 3s. To create rapport, appreciate, and you already mentioned it, appreciate their work.
Yeah, absolutely.
Table, appreciate their value that they're able to bring. And also speed up when you're talking. Stop talking so slow. That's also a thing for me. Try to avoid getting in the way of their forward momentum or taking too much of their time, right? We talked through some of these. Join them in being active, getting results, earning recognition. So again, let's come along, let's partner, let's, you know, co-mission, let's do this together. So definitely join in the fun with them. To handle conflict, allow for aggressive exchanges while staying on track with the goals. So that's fine. We can talk about things in a heated fellowship. But let's stay on track. Let's not spiderweb. Let's not talk about other things that we're not here to talk about. Remind them that successful results can come from many different styles. You just hit on that. And that people are important. So challenge their rhetoric or propaganda while allowing them to save face. So sometimes you just kind of talk through that. Let them process through that with them, and give them the ability to tell you what it is that they know, and then you can take it or leave it, and let that be it. To support their growth, help them look inside and tell the truth about who they really are. Support them in having the feelings that they have sometimes a hard time finding, especially with their failures. Encourage them to slow down and pay attention to their health. We talked about ignoring that self-care. Value them for who they are, not only for what they do and what they bring to the table. They do care, want people to care about who they are inside. And then their growth transformation, their mecca, where they want to reach, to let go of the image and the social persona and find one's inner essence. So you two obviously are healthier threes, obviously. So the audience got a chance to actually talk to people who have done the growth work. You guys have done the work, so you know how to avoid a lot of the pitfalls of a three. So with that being said, one last thing, soundbite I want from you all is, what is one thing of how you would want to add to this list as a three and relating to you? What's one thing you want people to know on how to relate to you?
Go ahead.
I saw this actually. I can't take credit for it, but I saw it and I was like, dang it, that is so right on. During this pandemic, somebody posted a question and it said, are you checking on your strong and healthy friends? And I thought about that and I was like, it's really funny because I was asked to check on people. I was asked to look after people. But I did not. I mean, I don't think anybody really checked on me. I mean, maybe my small group, which we checked on each other, but very, very few people, if anyone at all. I mean, I think a couple names are coming to mind after some time had passed, but nobody went, hey, I wonder how Alyssa's doing. It was more like, who are you, what are you doing to check in? And my life during this season didn't change at all. In fact, it ramped up. So I got busier instead of less busy with work and with professional commitments. And so the fact that people were saying, hey, I need you to do this, but nobody was saying, how are you doing? I was like, wait a second. Like, time out. And honestly, I would say this happened probably 7 weeks into the pandemic that I saw this. And I thought, I wonder, nobody's checked on me. And it didn't even cross my mind. So I'm not saying that this was a pet peeve, but now that that's out there, I think if I could tell anybody, I'd be like, don't be put off by a 2-word answer or a quick, I'm great. Because the thing about a 3 that most people don't realize is, if you really want to know how I'm feeling, you're going to have to be present and persistent. I am not going to I will not tell you. It will not be the first thing.
Guys. No, she's not. Listen to her.
I mean, you're right. I mean, it will take a long time for me to actually disclose, hey, this really is bothering me. Not because I don't want to tell somebody, almost because I don't know how to say it myself. So I have to actually be asked enough, or better yet, have somebody say, look, I've learned you. I know you well enough to know something's not right. So I'm wondering, how is this? Really, where are you? And ask me questions about, how am I doing with self-care? When am I doing yoga? Start putting me into check. And then eventually I'll come to the point where I'm like, ooh, there's my pain point.
That's good.
So does that answer your question? I think it's more than one sound, but I would say check on me. Check on me.
Check on me. I like that. How about you, Frank?
Yeah, so one thing, and I say this often, but life is a matter of perspective. I don't know if you're familiar with Andy Andrews. He's written many, many books, but he talks about it all. This is perspective. And I think for folks like us, in a sense, is type 3, or very aggressive, or over the top, as they say, type, whatever group you're talking about, is that, I'm just going to do it, and it's from my perspective. And sometimes what I've had to learn is, especially, I try to, get on social media a little bit, but not as much as I used to before this whole thing started back in March, is that I have to look at it from where they are in life. Something caused them to be that way. something happened, something they learned or didn't learn in life. And
Right.
so that's the thing that I've learned through this. That's the support to growth part of it, I'd have to say, is that life is a matter of perspective. And so, listen, like you said, now maybe it's because of my age, but I had people check on me. Hey, you okay? Yeah, I'm good. I'm out. I just did 5 miles. I'm good. And so it's sort of like that but not too many. But I'm with you. It's like a lot of the strong folks are checked on. So we're always checking these others, or we're doing the checking on folks. But I have to look at it because I see people say is issues are caused by, and then they'll just name a generation, whatever it might be. You just pick it, whether it be the boomers or the millennials or whatever. And I talk about it actually, again, not to, shameless plug, but in the book is that we're talking about intergenerational helping each other. Is that from each perspective? Okay, so from my perspective, I saw the Vietnam War. I saw the social injustice back in the 60s. I saw all those things. So many different things have transpired in my life. So I will look at it so much different than somebody that's 17 years old. And so that's something that, for me, it's been a transformation, a growth. When I came upon Andy's work, quite a few years ago now, I really took that to heart. Is everything is a matter of perspective. I'll leave it as such. So that's something that I've really learned about people, especially these last couple months, is a lot of folks are very quick to judge based on their perspective. And I think that's, if I could do anything else, it'd be significance. Because if you look at my social media thread, it's always the same thing. It's trying to encourage, trying to get somebody to look at something different. Again, trying to be like Barnabas, the encourager. And, I don't tell somebody to look at it from a different perspective, but I do tell folks to look at, I do say it all the time, look at life in a different perspective, but also look at the details, because too often we just move past those. And that's been my growth transformation. If but anyhow.
So we're going to check on our friends and we're going to get some perspective. So those are definitely two great tips to add. And again, I just want to thank Alyssa and Frank for joining me tonight and talking about the Enneagram Type 3s. It was amazing. I've learned so much about both of you and also just about different perspectives from a 3. So until next time, this is Joanie from On Purpose Coaching, where we challenge you to do better on purpose. Thank you for tuning in to On Purpose Coaching with your coach, Joanie Bob. Make sure to subscribe down there in the right-hand corner and like my videos if they made an impact on you today. Visit my website, onpurposeplanningandconsulting.com, and sign up for your next step in practical improvement. Use code Enneagram for 50% off a one-time coaching session until the end of July this year. Believe me, it will be worth every penny. Again, thank you for listening today to On Purpose Coaching, where we challenge you to do better on purpose.